Do I ask? Can I ask
Do you have questions? Yeah.
Well, where do the regulators come in? How do they monitor what's happening to make sure that things are happening within the boundaries, and how do they visit the bank? They look at the records every quarter. Do they?
That's a good question. My understanding is two ways. One, if the bank is a public company, and I think most of the big ones are, they have to release on some level their books, right? And their books will contain a summary, at least, of all the stuff that they have on the books. And then they have to list, the amount of capital they have, and if it's, it has to be X percent of whatever the books are. So they have to release reports that are, I don't know if they're necessarily normally audited. I do know that one thing about U.S. banking, at least, is government regulators always have the right to, whenever they want, go into any bank and just start looking at stuff. So they can do that. And I know, it might be, if there was if somebody was trying to cheat around the system, there could be a whistleblower. They have whistleblower programs to catch that. It could be, I don't really know exactly how the exact mechanism for monitoring that. I do know it's not a good idea to be at a bank. In general, I think you try to get around things by doing stuff like this as opposed to not telling people.
Yeah.
And you had another question?
Oh, well, I think I started to learn about swaps in the 2008 financial crisis because I think they were swapping.
They were swapping credit default.
Or credit defaults.
So this is this is an equity swap because stock is an equity. Yeah. There's lots of swaps, and all swaps are derivatives. Yes, but there were CDS, which are credit default swaps, and that's a topic that last semester I talked about. Or last year. Credit default swaps are... One thing that makes this type of thing more dangerous is... here we have a thing. We have... wait. Yes, one issue with swaps is it allows interested parties to make financial decisions without the thing involved, right? About the thing involved, which allows you to just go and go and go beyond, say, the stock, right? So you could have people buying and selling the stock because they wanted to make money. In some ways, maybe a swap is a bet on how a stock will do, which allows you to amplify the thing. And in 2008, they were doing that on the fact that, there was... debt that companies would be able to pay their debt, and essentially betting. And a CDS is a bet. It's a negative bet. It's a bet that a company will fail. So swaps, in some ways, are a tool to. It's a balance between increasing leverage and more efficiently drawing your lines and your boxes at the risk of creating problems.
So for the average person. Like me.
Like you.
I'm very average. I deposit my money into a bank. I have a savings account. I have a retirement account. I have college savings funds for my children. So I guess I have borrowed money for a house, but generally I'm putting my money away. Is my money being used for these swaps? Likely to be used by the banks, especially money that I'm very, I want to protect all of my money.
Yes.
But my retirement, I don't want people swapping that around for bad assets or. That's a
good question. I think short answer is yes. And one thing that we talk about in the course is that one way banks work is they either lie to us or they trick us, and they say everything's safe. There's no problems. We keep the money. You can get the money whenever you want, and then they go out and they do equity swaps. Now, equity swaps, I believe, are relatively safe, at least according to Money Stuff. This is a pretty normal, safe thing. The other answer is one way to think about what banks do is the way they make it safe, the way they make it seem safe, is they take all of these things. One thing is your money is not going to any individual deal. They take all the stuff the bank does and they mix it up. There's actually an analogy, like pink slime, like the stuff they make chicken nuggets out of. You take the chicken and you just suck all the meat off and you grind it up and you can make whatever you want. And that's what happens to your money. And at different levels, your bank deposit is the top level. When they pour the pink slime out, it goes to the bank depositors first. A college fund is probably pretty close up there. A retirement fund, depending on what you have, and then all the way down to the more riskier investments. But yeah, in general, I think the answer is yes. I do know now, I don't know if, and again, this is beyond the scope of the thing, we'll probably not show this in class, but, and I did want to talk about this though. So for my retirement, and I don't actually know if mine is like this, but one thing equity swaps in particular are good at is, say you want to have like a retirement account, and you just want to follow the market, right? Just however the market is, that's what you want to do. It would be relatively complicated and expensive for you. It would be too complicated and too expensive for you to buy each of the individual stocks in the S&P 500 and weight them correctly, right? Even for a fund manager, it would be somewhat of a deal. Like when people came in and out, they would always be adjusting this capital gains, blah, blah, blah. You just buy a swap. You buy a swap that says, hey, I will take the performance of the S&P 500 without having to buy any of the underlying equity, the securities or whatever. And so swaps have, I think, been a big part of this kind of boom in passive index investing, which is what a lot of people do.
So my money might be used in these swaps, but the goal for all the swaps essentially is to increase return on investment, right? So
yes, to increase, I think, efficiency.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're giving some money to get some incremental return on it, and the bank's doing the same.
And the bank, like again, in the first example, doing the swap didn't change. The swap allowed you to get what you wanted, but when the bank did the swap, it didn't change anything for you. It helped the bank, right? So the bank increases their thing, and they can, and in theory, maybe they can pass that on to you, or they can increase returns to get more customers or whatnot. And there's a firm called Capitalist, which is kind of like this has become their thing, and they're doing well, and there's a lot of banks and people investing in them, but they've essentially, it's called off. It sounds terrible. Off book equity swap, equity, blah blah blah. It's like, and it's it's not on the bank's book. It's in this third party thing. This firm Capitalist, they borrow money from these money market or huge institutional investors that have all this capital, and they can offer a better return, and then they offer the banks a service, and the banks don't have to put it on their book. The banks are able to do what they want to do, but keeping stuff off their book. And again, everybody wins, except the entire financial system is a little less capitalized, which in theory does make it a little more vulnerable to risk. In practice, well, we shall see.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah, now we know a little bit about swaps. I hope I was recording.